Which attackers could have been defenders? In this video, I'll be breaking down every attacker that I think Ubisoft could have released as a defender, and they would have still been powerful, or even more so. I'll be starting out with the attackers that I think could have been released on defense without any changes, and then I'll be talking about the ones that I think could have been a defender with some minor changes. Also, just keep this in mind when I'm discussing these operators. I'm discussing purely their gadget, not the weapons surrounding them, because obviously having a lot of these weapons from attack on defense would be way too strong. And anyways, we'll be starting off with IQ. I think IQ is a pretty obvious selection here, and that's just for the fact that Solace exists. I think Ubisoft likely took inspiration from IQ when making Solace, and so that's why I think IQ is a very clear choice here. If she was released as a defender on launch, it would have basically allowed her to do everything that old Solace could do while being able to shoot at the same time, which would have been even stronger. This would allow you to do things like shoot drones through the floor with your gun up and be able to shoot attackers while they're on their drones through the floor, and it would also allow you to deny the plant through the floor as well, since you could use your pistol to shoot enemies while they're planting. This would be insanely strong, but it's definitely not super far-fetched considering Solace already exists. Now, after IQ, the next attacker that I think could have been a defender is Twitch. And I think Twitch honestly could have been a really interesting operator to have on defense. This would have offered for some really unique and cool possibilities. It would allow Twitch to do things like counter hard breachers by driving her drones on a flank and then shooting the hard breach utility off of walls when the attacker's going to place them down. It would allow her to use her Twitch drones to deny ram gadgets from above or to destroy Asus shields from behind. And there'd be many other possibilities as well. This would also allow you to have a piece of mobile intel, which is extremely useful on defense especially. And so yeah, I think Twitch could have honestly made for a really cool defender, and I think Ubisoft could experiment with adding a defense operator that fills a similar role as Twitch. Now after Twitch we have Jackal, and the reason why I think Jackal would work as a defender is because he could be an absolutely great roamer. This would allow you to see attacker footprints and be able to flank them even if you don't have camera intel on them, and his ability to scan footprints would be useful for revealing an attacker to any roamers nearby so that you could easily surround them. And also his ability to track footprints would allow him to potentially shoot attackers through walls or through the floor. And I think it would still actually be pretty balanced as well. And I don't think it would be any stronger than Jackal currently is on attack. So I definitely think that this would be one of the more balanced operators that could have been released on defense. Now following up Jackal, we have Fina. And I think Fina would work as a defender mainly for the fact that she would be extremely useful for countering flashbangs. Obviously flashes are an extremely important part to any attack because you need to be able to throw flashbangs into a bomb site to blind defenders and be able to actually execute. And a lot of time you'll see enemy teams bring Ging or Blitz to help push power positions. If you had an operator like Fina, you'd be able to activate her ability and completely remove any flashes that anyone on the team is being hit with. You could also communicate with your team to remove any sort of other bad effects, like for example Zofia charges you'd be able to outright deny with a Fina search as well. And then the more obvious use case for Fina would be the fact that she could just revive any down defender from across the map, which would be exceptionally strong as well. She would likely end up being the strongest in this entire video, but I still think it could have worked out considering that she already does all of this stuff on attack, so I don't see why it would be imbalanced for her to be able to do it on the defense. Now following up Fina, the next attacker that I think could be a defender is Nomad, and that's because I think her air jabs could work great as a trap. You could preemptively set up her air jabs around the bomb site so that when the attackers walk through a doorway or a window, it will immediately knock them onto the ground and allow you to get a free kill. And then you could also use them reactively late in the round to force a planter off of the plant by shooting an air jab at them, and then they'd be forced to get off the plant and shoot it, or they'd be knocked back by the air jab and forced off of the plant either way. So I think with those two situations in mind, Nomad would be pretty strong on defense, but I think another reason why she'd be strong is because she would force utility out of the attackers. If the attackers heard an air jab on a doorway or a window, they wouldn't be able to crouch under it and shoot it like a defender could right now, because obviously there's going to be a defender playing close to an air jab somewhere. So they'd most likely have to waste some form of frag grenade or other explosive to be able to get the air jab out of the way, which would make Nomad even stronger because it would force the attackers to waste some sort of explosive utility or EMP. And I definitely don't think that this would be too strong either, especially since her air jabs produce such a loud noise that the attackers would know that a trap is there before they ever even walked into the room. Now following up Nomad, we have Zero, who I think is another pretty obvious operator to be on this list, and that's just for the fact that he's so similar to Valkyrie. He's basically Valkyrie but better. He has 6 cameras right now, all of his cameras have lasers, and they would obviously be extremely useful, arguably more useful than Valkyrie, because while his cameras are more obvious than a Valkyrie camera, they do have the additional laser laser, and he gets 6 of them, which means he would have double the amount of cameras that Valkyrie does. And his laser would be nice to do things like deny drones and destroy other important attacker gadgets, especially if you were able to hide a camera somewhere where they didn't expect it. So I definitely think Zero could have fit into the defender roster just fine. And the same thing goes for the next operator, Osa. Osa would fit into the defender roster because she'd basically be a whole lot like pre-rework Goyo. She'd be able to give the team arguably 2 stronger deployable shields that could then be played behind. And then you could also combine her shields with Wamai and Jaeger to make them harder to deny. And because of her giving her team 2 deployable shields, it would allow you to set up bomb sites in a completely different way than you would be able to before. Now, obviously her shields would have the disadvantage of being completely see-through, which means that the attackers would be able to more easily react to you trying to swing them, but it also means that you'll have better angles on the attackers when they're pushing you, which means they have to be a lot more worried and careful when they're swinging someone behind an Osa shield than they would when they're swinging someone behind a deployable shield. So with all of this in mind, I definitely think Osa would fit into the defender roster just fine, and she'd arguably be a pretty strong one at that. And following up Osa, we have Rayora. Rayora is an operator that I think would fill a very similar role to Castle because her Rayora panels would be able to block lines of sight from the attackers. However, they would have situations where they'd be more useful than a castle barricade. And that's just because of the fact that they can be opened on command, which would allow the defenders to freely rotate between a doorway without having to destroy it like they would a castle barricade. This could allow you to flank attackers who aren't expecting you to open the panel, and it would allow you to set up Rayora panels in positions you couldn't set up a castle barricade before, since it would allow you to block a line of sight temporarily if you needed to rotate and then reopen it so that you can hold the angle. Now, after talking about Rayora, I now want to talk about the attackers that I think could have been defenders with a few small changes. And the first of which is Grim. I think Grim could have been a really strong defender if his bees were set up as a trap instead of them being launcher deployed. This would allow Grim to throw his bee canisters above a doorway or a window or on the ground, and then when the attackers walk into their radius, the bees would start swarming, revealing the position of that attacker. This will allow you to potentially shoot attackers through walls or through the floor, get nitro kills, and it would also allow you to just get information, which is extremely important on defense. They would also likely have to reduce the amount of bees that Grim would use to maybe like 2 or 3, but even if he only had 3, I think it would be exceptionally strong because of how much information it would give you if an attacker stepped within their range. Now, following up Grim, we have Sins. Now, I arguably think that Sins could be an even better defender than they currently are an attacker if they were given some small changes to their walls. The reason I say this is because their walls would arguably be more useful if they were able to be pre-placed, especially if they maintain their bulletproof status they currently have, and they could be toggled separately. This would allow Sins to set up smoke walls across the map in different spots and then toggle them on command to allow a teammate to rotate away or to allow a teammate to sneak up on the attackers without them being able to see them. And this would also force the attackers, if they wanted to get rid of the smoke wall, to destroy it with some sort of explosive or to deny it with EMPs. I think this would be a much more stronger use case than the way the Sins is currently used, and it would allow the defenders to play bomb sites in ways they wouldn't have been allowed to before, since they could spontaneously cut off lines of sight from the attackers. And then the final operator that I think could have been reworked slightly to be a defender would have been Gridlock. And I think that if Ubisoft just made her track stingers bulletproof but removed a few of them from her, she could have been a great defender. The reason why I say this is because they would basically be used as a stronger set of barbed wire. And as we all know, barbed wire is extremely strong on defense. And so if you had a stronger set of those and you had more of them than the default set of barbed wire, so let's say she had 3, this would allow her to be an extremely powerful force because it would force the attackers to waste utility to get rid of them, and if the attackers wanted to just walk through them like barbed wire, they would take a lot more damage. And it would also obviously produce a lot more noise if the attackers wanted to get rid of them than normal sets of barbed wire, since the attackers would have to waste explosives on it. And anyways, that's going to wrap up today's video. Let me know if you guys agree with any of the attackers I put in this video, or if you think any other attackers could have been defenders in the comments down below. I'd love to hear from you guys. If you enjoyed today's video, I make these content just like this twice a week, so go subscribe to the channel and follow me on Twitter if you don't want to miss the next upload. Now, if you want to watch another video just like this one, a video will be popping up on your screen right now that I'm sure you all enjoy. I'll see you next time, friends, and peace.